Hi everybody, it's Mrs. Francis. I'm hoping that this will work for you guys with trying to learn all about viruses and bacteria. So what you are looking at right now is the first page of the notes, and you'll notice that there are some pictures of viruses, different types of viruses up here, and then this is a picture of a bacteria. So we'll be talking about the differences between viruses and bacteria in the next few minutes. So the question is, are viruses living or are they not living? And actually the answer is not. They are not living. So you might ask me, well, why are they not living? You have to think all the way back to when we talked about what are the characteristics that something have, be, or do to be considered living. Now, take a minute and think about all of those things that an organism has to have, be, or do to be considered living. So what's the one thing that viruses can't do that something else that's living can? Well, that they can't reproduce on their own. There's not mommy viruses and daddy viruses and we get baby viruses. The virus can't divide itself in half like a bacteria does. So viruses actually have to reproduce inside of one of your healthy cells. So it's kind of one of those weird things in life where it's not really living, but it's not really not living. A bacteriophage is a virus that infects a bacteria. So that's just the name that we give to it. So then how do viruses cause disease? Well, a virus does have a genetic material. It either has DNA or RNA in it. And this is a pretty typical picture of a virus right here. This is a protein coat. It's called a capsid. And all the squiggly lines in there, that's the genetic material. So what happens is this virus will attach itself to a healthy cell inside of you, and it will literally inject its genetic material down inside of you. Now, once that happens, there's one of two things that's going to happen. Some viruses, like unfortunately the virus that we're all experiencing right now, COVID-19, they will immediately start replicating or making copies of itself. And what happens is that host cell gets so full of viruses that it explodes. And then all of those new viruses go and find more of your own healthy cells, and they keep going and going and going. Now, there are others, however, that don't kill the host cell immediately. If you've ever gotten a cold sore, or you ever know anybody that has a cold sore, usually they don't pop up all the time. But they'll pop up when you've had too much pop to drink, or when you're under stress, or my sister gets them when she eats too many tomatoes because of all the acid. And so they don't start reproducing until it seems like the most inappropriate time. Those two types of the way that viruses reproduce are called lytic and lysogenic. A lytic infection is what's going on with COVID-19 right now. So you've got a virus, it's injecting its DNA into a host bacteria cell in your body, and right now that virus DNA is killing off the host cell's DNA, and it's turning this cell into a little virus factory, and pretty soon that's going to burst open and release thousands and thousands of new viruses. Now, a cold sore, on the other hand, the way it reproduces is called lysogenic. And the virus's DNA actually combines with the bacteria's DNA. It's kind of hiding within the bacteria's DNA. And as these bacteria cells reproduce, the virus's DNA gets reproduced along with it. Well, when something triggers that, for instance, that cold sore to pop up, what happens is this bacteria, this viral DNA in the bacteria, then will become lytic. So all viruses eventually will destroy the host cell. Some of them do it immediately, like COVID-19. Some of them hide in that host cell for a little bit, and that is more like a cold sore. If you've ever heard the term retrovirus, a retrovirus has RNA in it instead of DNA, and HIV is a retrovirus, which is one of the things that makes it so difficult to have a vaccine for or a cure for. So that's viruses, and they are not really living, but they're not really not living. Bacteria, on the other hand, are most definitely living, and we define them by their shape. They can be rod-shaped, they can be round, or they can be spiral. Rod-shaped bacteria look like this, and their name is called bacilli. Round-shaped bacteria look a lot like this, and they're called cocci. Or if you've ever gotten strep or heard of strep, it's actually Streptococcus bacteria. That means it's a whole bunch of these round bacteria. And then some bacteria can be spiral-shaped, and they're called spirilla. So usually when we think of bacteria and viruses, we think about them as not being very helpful to us. But actually, there's a lot of bacteria that are very, very helpful. They are part of the food chain. They're producers, and they're also decomposers, some of them. They carry out nitrogen fixation. We talked about that a long time ago, where plants can't use the nitrogen in the atmosphere, so these bacteria have to change it into a form that a plant can use so it can produce food so that then we can eat it. You need bacteria for cheese, for yogurt, and bacteria actually produce vitamins in our intestines. So one of the most important ones that your good bacteria in your intestines produces is vitamin K. Vitamin K is for blood clotting. So if you didn't have those good bacteria, your blood wouldn't be able to clot. So how do bacteria reproduce? Well, they don't need a host cell like viruses do. Bacteria reproduce by what's called binary fission. And binary fission is just basically bacteria dividing in half through the process of mitosis. So it's pretty simple. One of the kind of creepy things that bacteria do, though, is they can also go through a process called conjugation. So if a bacteria reproduces like this, genetically, the new bacteria is going to be identical to the old bacteria. Well, that's all well and good as long as everything's going okay. But what if you're taking an antibiotic to kill off all of these? Well, Mother Nature's kind of an amazing thing, and she wants to try to make sure some of those bacteria will survive. So bacteria can actually trade some genetic information by using this little bridge here through this process called conjugation. And it will just help increase the genetic diversity of a bacteria population. Kind of a creepy thing. Now, of course, we all know, especially right now, that there's a lot of diseases caused by bacteria and viruses. And a lot of times we don't know whether a disease is caused by either a bacteria or virus. So in general, we just call it a pathogen. So anything that causes a disease is called a pathogen. Bacteria are going to produce disease in one of two ways. They either damage the cells of the tissue and break down the cells for food, or they release poisons, and those poisons then travel throughout your body, interfering with the normal activity of whatever host that it happens to be in. So they either destroy cells directly and use those cells for food, or they produce poisons. Most bacterial diseases and some viral diseases can be prevented by vaccines. You guys have all had, or probably most of you, have had lots of vaccinations in your time. If you think about it, you've had MMR, measles, mumps, and rubella. Your generation is the lucky one that got the vaccine for chickenpox, so you didn't actually have to experience chickenpox like my kids did. Polio was my generation's new vaccine, so none of us had to have polio. But a vaccine is a preparation of weakened or dead pathogens, and they inject that into your body, and then your body builds up an immunity to it. So in case you ever come in contact with that pathogen, your body already has defenses built up and you won't get sick. Now, if you're already sick, how do you counteract that? Well, if it's a bacteria, you're going to take antibiotics. But viruses do not respond to antibiotics because they're not really living. The only way you can deal with a viral infection is to let your body do its job. Your body has some built-in mechanisms to take care of viruses, and if you take anatomy and physiology in the next couple of years, you'll learn that. So if you do have a bacterial infection, how do you know, or how does your doctor know, what antibiotic to give you? Well, if you take bacteria and you use something called a Gram stain, some of them turn purple and some of them turn pink. Gram-positive bacteria turn purple and Gram-negative bacteria turn pink. And the Gram-positive bacteria, we can use some of the more simple antibiotics. When you were little, you probably all took the pink stuff that all the little kids drink, and a simple form of penicillin would work here. But the pink or gram-negative bacteria, they're a little harder to kill. So we've had to develop some stronger antibiotics in order to deal with those. Viruses and disease. Viruses and attack cells, certain cells in the body, and they're going to cause the symptoms of the disease. Like with COVID-19 right now, they're attacking lung tissue. So people are having a hard time breathing. You're getting a fever. And viral diseases, like I said, cannot be treated with antibiotics. The best thing you could do is, if there's a vaccine out there, get it to try to prevent it. But otherwise, you're just going to have to let your body take care of it. But the only thing you can do is deal with the symptoms. This is a list of diseases. You do not need to write these down, but this is a list of diseases that are caused by viruses, and I wasn't sure how many of these you already knew. A cold is caused by a virus. The flu, AIDS, you probably all know, chickenpox, hepatitis B, West Nile virus. All of these diseases are caused by viruses, and if you get one, all you can do is rest, drink plenty of fluids, and let your body do its job. Viruses can also attack plants and other animals as well. We're not the only ones that get viral infections. Here are a few questions that have been on standardized tests before that I wanted you to take a look at and see if you could come up with some answers. So this first one, it says, most bacteria reproduce asexually, mammals reproduce sexually. Describe how these two methods of reproduction differ with respect to the genetic makeup of the offspring produced. And really all this question is asking is, which of these types of reproduction would produce organisms that were genetically identical, and which would produce organisms that were genetically diverse? And so, of course, asexual reproduction, the offspring are genetically identical to the parents. Sexual reproduction provides for genetic diversity. You are a mix of your mother and father's genetics. So in 1864, Louis Pasteur, I don't know if you've heard of him before, he was asked to investigate diseases affecting the wine in Arbois, France. And I don't know if you are aware of this, but France is very well known for its wines. And he didn't know about bacteria and viruses at the time, but he knew there was something that they couldn't see that was making the wine go bad. And so then he discovered that these microorganisms could be killed by heating the wine to 55 degrees Celsius for a very short period of time. What is that process called today? Well, if you know nothing else about it, look at his name, look at word parts, and hopefully you could pick out that, wow, this sounds a lot like his name. So pasteurization is what the process he is known for. And last but not least, this is kind of a long question, and it starts out with a long scientific name, Bacillus thuringiensis. And I always tell kids that if you're taking a standardized test and there's some big long name there that is going to mess with you, just call it Bob. So we're going to call this guy Bob. Bob's a bacterium, and a bacterium is one single bacteria. So Bob's a bacterium, and he contains a gene that results in the production of a natural pesticide that kills insects. Genetic engineers have successfully inserted Bob's gene into the DNA of some corn varieties, allowing the corn to produce its own pesticide. So what negative consequence could result from this technology? A, B, C, or D. So what I want you to do is try to figure out that answer, and you are going to see an assignment in Schoology that says, it will say the name of this Bacillus thuringiensis, and you're going to give me the answer, either A, B, C, or D, after you figure it out. All right, that's it, everybody. We'll talk to you later.